Hello YouTube, my name is Rena, and today I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about actively ever since I started playing video games pretty much. And that is something called conscious decision making or conscious gaming, which I find makes a big difference between a lot of players because there's players that have it and players that don't have it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about good players or bad players because people can be good just instinctively or not instinctively or due to a lot of practice or whatever. Here's the thing. So there's a lot of guides on the internet, right? You've probably all seen them. And for Overwatch, there's tracer guides, Winston guides. There's guides for every hero, pretty much. And there's map guides and positioning guides and all those things. And now, these things, these guides, they're good. I'm not wanting to say anything about guides. Guides are good. Guides can help you discover these things. And when you stumble across them, you may think to yourself, "Oh, that's interesting. I haven't considered this yet," or and even I have those. Why am I even saying even I? Because I like to think of myself as an analytic person, as a conscious gamer. Back in the day when I played League, I would think of myself as someone who actually thinks about counters and so on, and strategies and maneuvers. I like to say the word maneuvers instead of strategies because the strategy is a big picture. A strategy is really big, and I will come to that in a bit. But let's just say I've often found myself thinking that a lot more people should be like that, analytic, thoughtful, rational, you know, and this is the first video of a free video series where I want to talk about something called becoming a more self-aware player. And this first video is dedicated to conscious decision making. And it's not just about yourself, it's about you, your role in Overwatch. It can be applied to other games. But to structure this video a little bit, I have written out a few key phrases, not phrases, or rather, words that can be part of, your checklist whenever you run into a game, whenever you try out a new hero, stuff like that. But it can also be sort of a structure for me now as I go through this video. So what I want to talk about is instinct, decision making, strengths, weaknesses, role condition, win conditions, lose conditions, and reflecting. Now, the first point, instinct, is something that I feel is very important. A lot of players, pro players, they can play instinctively and do the right stuff most of the time. But oftentimes, even outside of the video game world, I have found that instincts aren't always right. Like, did you know that there is a path on the right side when leaving the defending side of Temple of Anubis that can get you behind the team, the enemy team? Or I say behind, but a good team should be aware that there's two sides they could be flanked on as they try to take this path. uh, the B section of the game. Still, you always see people coming from just the one side, and whenever I am in a game, I also tell my team, camp them, spawn camp them. And where do we go? We go to the right side. And we block off the path where most people go. Now, why do people go this path? It's probably because of this blue line that led them down that way, and because one way is always the way people go. And I've seen this in many other games where people are so prone to go one certain direction to make things as standard for themselves that standards for everything kind of occurs. That is the entire reason why we have metas, because no one tries different things. And then when different things happen, everybody's surprised and oh my god, I didn't expect that. And so when you have like a Reaper who goes around the right side behind the enemy team and uses his ult, suddenly that's such a surprise, even though it shouldn't have been. You should have considered it, quite frankly. But it is in the human mind to always try to categorize and standardize things, which is why there's a meta, which is why there's certain people that just aren't played, even though they fill good roles for your team. And to wrap this point up a little more, Instinct is something you should not rely on. That is my advice to you, to myself, to anybody really playing video games. Instinct is sometimes not what gets you through it in the way you want to be playing. A lot of times you will see, just to name a few examples here, you will see Winston's jumping into the enemy team thinking they can disrupt the enemy team. What they're doing is being suicidal, and that doesn't help anyone. Because if they are a single target big in the middle of the enemy team, they're just screaming kill me, and then they're killed, and then your team lacks a lot of zoning potential. Just one of the examples. Another example, which I wished I had visuals for because I actually recorded this one day in a game, but I deleted this video since, not thinking I might need this for one of my future videos. But I was on the Temple of Anubis defense, and we had to hold the first point because of sudden death. And we had a bastion behind a Reinhardt shield. I know, really cheesy strategy, but it worked for the most part until a Reaper came around from the right side. And he attacked, and Reinhardt, who was supposed, his role, which is also something I want to talk about later, was to shield Bastion, so Bastion could deal damage. Now his instinct told him he had to protect Bastion, and his instinct also told him that he had to kill Reaper. So he instinctively went after that Reaper, fighting him 1v1. Sure, I was there behind him on a mercy, but a Reaper has 250 health. It takes you 4 hits to kill him on Reinhardt, and he deals a lot more damage to you than maybe a soldier would. You are playing as a tank against a tank shredder. You should be aware that this is not the right course of action. You should be aware that this Reaper can't do anything to you if you simply stay on your post with Bastion holding your shield towards his direction, because as soon as this Reaper comes close, he's gonna be shredded by Bastion. And there you have it. Instincts aren't always right. Even though it is your instinct to swing your hammer at the enemy team or the enemy Reaper, it may not always be the right decision. It may not always be the right decision to stand where exactly you're standing. It may not be the right decision to do what you're doing. And now you have to start asking yourself, what should I do then? And that's where we come to the next point. Conscious decision making, which is what this video is also titled. You should, instead of simply following your instincts, try to come up with an agenda. Try to come up with questions for yourself and be conscious about your decisions. Don't just let instincts make you decide things. Don't just follow your instincts. Actually, consciously make decisions about what you want to do and what you need to do. And for that, this list of words I gave you earlier comes in very handy. Now, conscious decision making isn't something you can just always do. It is also not something you can just do out of a whim, and it is something you need to prepare. Definitely, it is something you need to take some time to, maybe even take a paper and a pencil and write some stuff down, because it helps, trust me. Also, another tip for conscious decision making, just on the side, record your gameplay and look at it afterward, but it's also a point that I'm going to make later on. Now, back to decision making. Now, the main question here is why. You need to ask yourself why. Why am I standing here and not there? Why should I be standing there and not here? Now, these questions you can't just answer without having any sort of, base on which you are answering these questions. And that is where the next few points, strengths, weaknesses, role conditions, win conditions, and lose conditions come in. And I will use soldier, one of the more generic heroes in the game, as an example to talk about decision making on soldier. Now you will have some guides out there. You will have like a Winston guide on there, and most guides start with this: strengths, weaknesses, what is your goal, what do you want to do, what is your role in the team, value, blah blah blah. Now these things, as you watch this guide, they only tell you this about this one character, about this one hero. But what if you could actually come up with these things yourself? Because the people who wrote these guides, they didn't have a guide either. the people who are now playing the pro scene that played since beta, they didn't have a guide either. So this is where I see the difference between a lot of players. Some do this stuff and some listen to this stuff. And it doesn't hurt to listen, but it also doesn't hurt to do. So here's what you do from now on. You will take the heroes you play and actually run through this list, like I am running through right now. So let's look at Soldier. To do that, I will actually start a game and I will talk you through my conscious analysis of Soldier and how we should be playing him. Now let's look at his strengths and his weaknesses. For that, I will now enter the game and we will talk about it.
Now entering King's Row.
So what are Soldier's abilities?
Prepare your defenses.
No, that's Reaper. Alright, so Soldier's abilities. You have a rifle, you have your ult, you have sprinting, you have a healing, and you have helix rockets. Now, that seems very generic, but when you actually think about it more precisely, it actually becomes rather tactical. You know, to think about this. Like, think about it as if you're not the person playing this character, but you're actually a general and you're trying to come up with a strategy to counter something. Think of yourself as the head of the strategy. Now, this is the blue line I talked about earlier. And now, Soldier's strength is definitely his speed. That is what distances him mostly from other characters. And from Bastion, for example, because Bastion can do most things Soldier can do, but he's just not as fast at them. So Soldier's main strength is his speed. Now his other main strengths is being able to heal yourself even when you're away from a healer or from your team. Another strength could be to heal your team. And then his final strength is precision. You can shoot pretty precisely at most things that are quite a while away. And that's that. So what are his weaknesses? His weaknesses are tanks, because you don't deal a lot of damage to tanks simply by shooting at them with an assault rifle. Because tanks, they may have armor, they have a lot of HP, you can't just take them on head on, and tanks usually try to get in close on you. So that is one of his weaknesses. Another weakness to him is close quarter combat. Now, a lot of people will say, yeah, but I kill a Reaper sometimes, or I kill a Genji when he's really close to me. Sure, but I wouldn't say it's one of his strengths. I would actually say it's one of his weaknesses. And even if you can come out, you know, victorious in one of those situations, that still doesn't mean that it isn't a weakness and that you could play even better if you nullify that weakness. Now, that's probably all of his weaknesses and all of his strengths. Now, what are his roles, or what is his role condition, as I like to call it? Soldier's condition, and his role condition, and his goal, so to speak, is to continuously shoot at the enemy from wherever they're coming from, without being contested, without being killed, staying alive, shooting at the enemy, poking at them, dealing damage, bringing them to half health, or maybe even killing them. That is his goal, that is his role condition. So that becomes your task. Now, with all these things in mind, where should you play Soldier? Should you stand right here where I'm standing right now? No, you should not. But maybe you had to watch this guide to learn this. Now, where I play Soldier, where I love to play Soldier, is up here, where he can make use of all of his strengths and minimize his weaknesses. Now, as the game starts, I'm standing right here because a lot of times a Pharah will come out of here, or a sniper will be here, or Mercy will come after the Pharah, you know, something like that, you know, Hanzo, whatever. Of course, this is not really a safe position to be, because the enemies, they can shoot you from there and from here, without your team, which is mostly around here and behind, you know, these perimeters. They can't really help you. They can't really help you with that crossfire. So you might get into enemy crossfire. Well, your enemies aren't in any crossfire. That means you are in a disadvantaged position. And remember what I said about what your role goal is, or your role condition. It is dealing damage to the enemy team while being with as little pressure as possible. Pressure is the key word here. You don't want pressure on yourself. So I will stay here for a while. I will shoot at people as they come out here as we trickle out, but I will quickly run back here and start shooting from here because it's a lot safer. I still have this window in my sight which gives my team some information. I can tell them when somebody comes through here because a lot of people might not be able to see what walks through here and up there and behind here because of, this buzz and stuff that might be in their way. So it definitely helps to be able to do that. But now what will I do when a Reaper comes through here and I know he's walking through there? I'm not going to stay here and fight him. I will not, because I know that is one of my weaknesses. I will in fact jump over here and stay here. Why? Because when a Reaper comes around here, I can shoot him and I can perhaps even make him use his Ray form if I get him low enough. And the Reaper can't really shoot me from over there. He would have to come over here. But it is impossible to jump over here without using a speed boost. So he would have to teleport. But if he teleports, I have another section of time that I can use in order to get away from him and in order to distance myself again. And now this is the main key factor. You want to keep distance on the enemy team. Now another reason I like to stand on these ledges is because if you're getting shot at, let's say enemy team comes in through here, and you're getting shot at and you drop down to half health,
60
you can
seconds
simply walk
remaining.
back here, and this the corner will protect you. If someone is down here, you're shooting at them, you get back, you can instantly pop your heal, and you're all good again, If you're in the street, you can't pull back, they keep being able to fire at you. Even if you walk 10 meters backwards, they keep being able to fire at you. And also, you have hiding places where you could potentially hide from a Pharah, and you have a health pack. And one more reason,
30
I will talk
seconds
about
remaining.
later when I'm actually talking about the win conditions and lose conditions. Alright, I'm almost done here. Now another position is back here where I like to run to. And over here. Now notice how I'm always sprinting, and this is Soldier's main strength. You want to make use of that. If you're just standing in one spot like down there, you're not making use of one of his strengths, and that is stupid. You shouldn't play Soldier then, you should just play a Bastion, because Bastion is like Soldier, just with less mobility. And that pretty much wraps up my positioning, you could say guide, for Soldier, but I merely went and ran you through some of the decisions I made and why did I make them, and with that you should be able to think about the same things for other people, for other heroes. And being able to do that by yourself without relying on guides is pretty big, because then if a new hero comes out, there's not going to be a guide for a while, but you can already think about what do you want to do with this hero. And a lot of times I still watch guides, and you should too, because guides tell you what other people think, how other people play a hero. It will help you understand why people do certain things, and it may even give you an idea of why should you do things a certain
Prepare
way.
to attack.
Now, I'm also going to talk to you now about something different, something I like to call win conditions and lose conditions. And these are more global. These are meant for your whole team, not just for yourself. Sure, as I said, you have role conditions where you have to think about what is my role. Like for Reinhardt, his role was this and not that. Me, my role was this and not that. You constantly have to fill this role, and if that role is not something your team needs, you need to switch. But what role does your team need? Now that is something that is determined by your win condition. And every team has a win condition and a lose condition, depending on what kind of heroes you're picking and what kind of heroes the enemy team is picking. Now, a win condition is a condition under which you win the game, or a fight, or a certain objective. And the lose condition is a condition which deters you from that, which hinders you from that. Now, a win condition could be if you have a Genji on your team. One of your win conditions could be that he's getting a kill on the back on maybe the enemy support, so there's no res for the enemy side after a big team fight. Another win condition if you have a Winston could be that he actually gets on a ledge, kills the soldier, as he should, or the Widowmaker, whatever it is. You know, like your team has a win condition. So let's say you're playing with a D.Va and a Winston and a Genji and the Soldier and the Reaper and the Lucio. Now your win condition is not to slowly, kill the enemies. Your win condition is to go in there, right on the team, and wreak havoc on them. You know? And for the enemy team, their goal is to stop you from that. So what are you going to do? Like you have your win condition, they have their win condition, and they have a lose condition. Win and lose condition isn't really something you can talk about easily. It's a lot more subtle, it's not so clear, but there's one example that actually is pretty damn clear. And that is Symmetra and teleporters. That is the best example I can give you, and everything else is kind of the same way, but just not as clear and clear cut. So if the enemy team has a Symmetra, your win condition as the attacking team is to kill the teleporter, quite obviously, because their win condition is to be able to reinforce their point quickly. So you should be looking for it. You should be on soldier. You should run up here. You should jump down here, and you should look for it. Like you have a lot of speed. It may also help you to flank on the enemy team. Now keep in mind, you're not a Genji, you're not a Tracer. You're pretty much a sitting duck if your team or if the enemy team finds you. But you should tell your team that it is crucial that you find this teleporter because it is a win condition. And for the enemy team, definitely it is a win condition. And it is a lose condition for them if they lose their teleporter. I have played a game on Symmetra just yesterday where my teleporters were destroyed all the time. I'm not even kidding you, they were destroyed 3 out of 3 times. We still had a good hold, but our teleporters kept being destroyed. Now this is another place where the teleporter could be, where you can just jump right into. It could be down here, somewhere around here, good places to check for teleporters, or in here, Now, there was a Tracer on the enemy team that kept looking for my teleporters. I told my team, I'm sorry, but I never have a teleporter up, but she's actively looking for it. And that is how I define a good Tracer player. She knows that her role is to use her mobility in order to help her team achieve victory. And she knows that one of the win conditions for her team is to be able to get to the point faster than the enemy team. She knows this is a win condition, and she knows that if she can defeat this teleporter, kill this teleporter, it helps out her team more than just jumping around the backside of the enemies and poking them a little. So this Tracer really did a good job in doing what she had to do for her team. Now you should think about these kind of things too. What is your team's win condition in your current, setup? Now one thing I like to talk about, and one of the examples I also like to make, is Zarya. Now Zarya's win condition, or if you have a Zarya on your team, one of your win conditions is to win a big team fight by using her ult. So you should always try to communicate that. Now if you're on the opposing side, on the defending side, this is a point I like to keep making, and it happened many times. Also, this is another point where Soldier comes in handy again as an example. Now think about this, the enemy team has a Zarya, and most of your team is around this area, this red highlighted area in here. This is where most of your team is. Now think about one character on your team, Mercy. Where would Mercy be if all your team is here? Naturally, she'd be with the team. Sure, she might be hiding back here if she feels like there's a need for it, and heal people who are around here, trying to stay a little safe. Sometimes when I play Mercy, I also like to be in here, and I just heal the people who come back here, and I tell my team, come back here so I can heal you. And why am I back there? Because there's a Pharah and a Zarya on the enemy side, and I'd rather not get killed by them. But what I prefer to tell my team is spread out. Because look at Mercy. Her abilities and her strengths and weaknesses. One of her strengths is to be able to fly, and she can fly out of a Zarya ult. So where should you stand on Soldier? You should stand up here or over there. And why? Because if something happens back here, like a Roadhog Saria old, whatever. Your Mercy can actually fly up here to you, and she can survive and use her res, which is a win condition for your team. Your team needs a res. You know, if you lose a big team fight, you were on the defending side, the res becomes really important. So you should always try to keep your Mercy alive and to think about what kind of stuff could I do to help improve this Mercy in how she wants to play, what she wants to play. Now, with that, I'm wrapping up win conditions and lose conditions. You should think about this a little more. You should, when you're in the selection, in the hero selection, you should think about what does your team try to do? What does your team want to do? You know, if you have certain heroes on your team, what is their goal? What is their roles? What is the win condition for these heroes? And what can you do in order to help that, support that, and so on? Now, the last thing I want to talk about is reflecting. And I said that before that I would touch back on this, but here's a few things you can do in order to help yourself reflect. Now, a lot of people don't like reflecting outside of video games or inside of video games, but I think it is one of the most crucial things to do. You could reflect firstly with your teammates. Like if you were in a pre-made with some people, don't start blaming, start talking. Start talking about what went wrong. Why did we lose? What was our win condition? What was our lose condition? So why did we lose? What hero on the enemy side countered us so we couldn't achieve our win condition, and what should we maybe have changed? It is good to talk to your team about that. Even just in the post match, talk about it. I mean, a lot of people start flaming and blaming, but it's not wrong to talk about it, and I'm always up to talk with my team about what happened. And as long as it's all civil and no one's, you know, pointing fingers at anybody and it's like, you're such a bad player, you lost us the game, it is okay to talk about, and you should be more comfortable talking about your gameplay and your role and what you did and admitting mistakes. I remember this Reinhardt that I told you about. I told him, why did you 1v1 a Reaper on Reinhardt? And he said, well, why the fuck not? And I told him, because now we lost the game. Surprisingly enough, 30 seconds later, we did lose the game. So how does this Reinhardt feel now? What should he feel? Chances are he feels like, whatever, I did what I had to do. But maybe, just maybe, he's going to sit down and think for a moment, how would this have panned out if I did something different? And now this is the key factor. Don't just reflect without any structure. Ask yourself key questions like, what could I have done different and what would have went different? Look at certain things and ask yourself, if I had done this, what would have happened? Don't just think about, oh, what I did was justified. Think about the other stuff. This Reinhardt should sit down and think about, if I had not charged that Reaper, what would have happened? He will most likely come to the conclusion that this Reaper would have had a hard time coming through that choke point because of Bastion, and that he may even have been killed while trying to get through it, or that the team would have just killed him if he had Wraith form through the Bastion on the point, and that should be the conclusion he should come up with. So, how else can you reflect? Your kill cam is a very important thing. I sometimes skip it too, and a lot of people probably skip it because it's annoying, because we don't like to see how we get killed. But it's important that we do. It is important that we look at that and we ask ourselves, how did this happen? How did this other hero take advantage of what we did? Did I maybe even do something wrong? Was I in a position where I shouldn't have been? This Reinhardt, if he watched his kill cam, he probably would have seen him fighting against the Reaper kind of stupidly and then get killed like a moron. I'm sorry to say this, but that's pretty much what he saw on his kill cam. He may have skipped it, and then he wouldn't have thought to himself, how stupid of me. I've played Reaper before, and I've been killed by Mei before, because I was frozen and she headshotted me. And then I looked and then I watched my kill cam and I realized I could have simply waveformed away from her. Now, why didn't I do that? Because I don't really have a lot of practice on Reaper. But now that I was killed once by May and I have looked at my kill cam, I have improved quite a lot. Because I've looked at this and I asked myself, why did this happen? Did I do something wrong? Could I have prevented this? This is another key factor. Could I have prevented this? And of course, there's reflecting on your own gameplay, and then there's reflecting on your team's gameplay. If you're playing in a pre-made of 6, you could think about what your strategy was, and this is where I go back all the way back to the start of the video. Strategy and maneuvers. Those are two different things. And strategy means the entirety of all the maneuvers. So one maneuver could be flanking, another maneuver can be pincering, another maneuver can be, all in. Those are maneuvers. And the strategy is the entirety of that. The the accumulation of all these maneuvers together. Now, your strategy could be to overwhelm the enemy, your strategy could be to slow push, your strategy could be to get picks and kills and then use your numbers in order to win. Now there's a lot of different strategies you can play and you can use a lot of different maneuvers to achieve this strategy. And now when you're reflecting, you should think about your strategy and your maneuvers. You should think about what maneuvers could we have made, what maneuvers should we have made, rather. If you lost, for example, if you didn't get the first point on like King's Row or something like that, what could you have done? What maneuvers could you have done? Or maybe your entire strategy was faulty. Maybe your strategy was to simply be better than the enemy team. Now, I've seen teams win even though they were worse than the enemy team. I've seen teams win even though they got completely wrecked in the first round and they still came out on top. Why? Not because they were the better team or they had the better players, but because they used a strategy that helped them close this gap, or maneuvers where the individual skill of all the enemies did not matter. And that is something you need to keep in mind. And with this, I conclude this video, and I'm sorry to have robbed you of so much of your time if all of this was already pretty common sense for you, but if it hasn't, maybe from now on you can practice this and eventually it will become instinctive, because to me it already is. When I look at the hero and when I started Overwatch, the first thing I did was look at all the heroes and think about their strengths and weaknesses, and I looked at the maps and I looked at certain things and I wondered, how could I be playing this to the most efficient way? And that is something that definitely helped me as a player, even though I may not be as mechanically skilled as other players. Because, trust me, I see a lot of players with very good mechanic skills that do very poorly on Overwatch in terms of ranking. For now, goodbye.